first one's always the most awkward.
Well, like I
Like,
said,
first time doing a podcast is always the most awkward.
there we go. All right, it's always one of those things.
All right. Let's see what we've got.
Thank you for the follow, Sweet Tea Chibi. Hopefully you enjoy. Also, it would have been hilarious if, if there was a user who went off and buy a sport energy drink. I might actually get Sweet Tea. That sounds really good. I don't know. But anyway, welcome to the HZRDCast. This is episode 1. Just a beta build. And I think this is kind of going to be the best way to kind of start it off, giving you an idea of like what's going to be happening here with the podcast, as well as kind of how everything is going to be set up. And so it's going to be me and Sapphire are going to be the main guys here. We're going to be talking about, everything that kind of comes up, like we're gaming related stuff, and just kind of our feelings about, and our perspectives on certain topics within gaming as well. And also, it's likely that we'll kind of go out to other places. Because, again, for us, we will have no problem voicing our opinions, if we want to. Because, we're vocal people. Sounds fun. Hopefully. But yeah, that's most likely what's going to happen is that all these are going to be uploaded in audio format onto my channel. So if by any chance you haven't seen one of the episodes, you'll be able to see it on YouTube. Well, there'll be like a 2-week delay, but you get what it. Anyway, I'm done talking. Saf, or what I'll be most likely calling Poke for the majority of this, and why don't you talk about yourself for a little bit,
Hi, my name is Sapphire and I. I am a VTuber who does mostly 100% runs and challenge runs for video games. I do go ahead and take requests when people get enough channel points. But for the most part, that's basically what I do.
Yep. And for me, if you are an a old-time viewer, you already kind of know what I do. I do Let's Plays, play FPSs, and essentially try and just make content out of nothing with me and my friends. And if you watch from the channel, from my YouTube channel, you'll see a series of stuff that I've done. And also, my friends are always joining in on that. But enough of that, our introductions. Let's get on to the topic of the beginning, and also the reason why I chose this title of just a beta build. And we're going to talk about Outriders. Outriders kind of came out, less than 2 weeks ago? And it's already has been a massive hit.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
it was a massive hit in terms of sales. It's the studio's biggest game, actually. Like, not just the biggest game, but the biggest sales that studio has ever made.
Yeah, and also, it beat out an IP. This is an original IP, never been worked on at all. And it beats out one that has essentially, the brand name itself is worth over $15 billion, if I remember correctly. Let me actually get you because they did the Marvel Avengers. And let's actually see what the brand name is worth, because it changes every single, day, but it is estimated, and I do apologize, $19 billion. $19 billion IP license. And it can't even break 10,000 players on it. Meanwhile, you have, technically a double-A game made by indie developers who are passionate about what they were making, essentially destroy Square Enix servers.
Wow. I had no idea that, well, actually, I knew it had beaten the Marvel's Avengers. I didn't realize how bad it had beaten it.
Oh yeah, no, like just thinking about it is that it's essentially the valuation of Marvel has, I think, almost like quintupled since they bought it out 10 years ago. No, sorry, 11 years ago. So, to give you that idea, and then also, compared to now, you have essentially like, yeah, People Can Fly has like a decent budget behind it, but it's still the fact that it's not based off of anything. Like, it's not having a huge like AAA title type backing like you see with Activision, EA, all that stuff. It's still just like, a small group compared to them, and then you have it where it's like they put their heart and soul into it. Boom, there you go, the fruit of their labor. And also, this is kind of something that really brings out a lot for it, because now we've kind of seen like a lot of these games that are coming out that are essentially passion projects that become bigger than any AAA name would have ever had. And I think that's kind of where, we should really start off this, because just the thought about it, like, Outriders is fun. I haven't had as enough time as, Saf has, but holy shit, I'm enjoying it. Like, there's been always a time where I'm just like, I want to play, but I have work. And it's always one of those things.
Let's go ahead and put this into perspective. How many hours do you have on Outriders?
I have, if I can, let me actually bring it up, because I have,
what, 10, 15 hours, something like that?
I think so. I have 12.6 hours.
I have almost 9 times that. I have 90 hours in the game.
Yeah, so God, it's weird, because this is, I think, the first time that, I have put that much time into something since Destiny, actually. And Destiny is my highest played game by a fuck ton. Like, to give you an idea, if you tallied up every single game that I have played, all combined, and all the hours, I can guarantee you 50% of it was from Destiny. And I have never had a feeling like that until Outriders. And I think that says a lot, because the way that Outriders has kind of, shown itself is that I'm not someone who plays third-person games at all. Like, if you look at my channel, I think there's maybe like 2 or 3 third-person games on there that I can think of off the top of my head. Gears 5, Control, and Spec Ops: The Line. 2 of those I recommend. Spec Ops: The Line and Control. Great games, by the way. But it's, I never liked the whole, like, perspective type deal, because I'm always someone who's an FPS kind of guy. I always prefer the first person. Mm-hmm. But this changes everything. Like, they made me, like, really reconsider third-person games. And I think that's one thing that, like, it says a lot when you have somebody who is a competitive, first-person player essentially think, you know what? This game is actually pretty good, and it's, even if it's third-person, I like it. Like, I like it a lot, and it's, it's not a hindrance.
Yeah. I mean, as far as perspective goes, I've never really cared whether it be first person or third person fixed camera, like the old Resident Evil games.
Oh, yeah.
I've never really cared whether it's like that or top-down perspective. However, I just go ahead and go into it and I play it and I enjoy it. There's not a whole lot of third-person games nowadays that are like over the shoulder or behind the back or whatever that catch my attention. In fact, Outriders didn't really catch my attention until, like, basically when the demo was coming out, and I was like, oh, this looks really interesting, but why is this blowing up all of a sudden? And for some reason, even though this game had been known about, like, for years, no, it didn't blow up in popularity until basically right before the demo came out.
And I think that's actually a really good thing, too.
It probably is, but at the same time, it's, like, interesting to think that game that like had somehow flown under the radar until literally right before the demo comes out, which is a month and a week before the game came out.
It is weird. It's really weird to really look at that, because honestly, when you really think about it, when you have something like this that will, ultimately become amazing, you always see like huge like advertisements, all that stuff. Meanwhile, we have People Can Fly has just been focusing down on the game, and it's like, okay, we got the demo. Why don't we announce it? Like, here you go, demo's live, cool, and that's it. They let the game, and I think that's what people need to do. Because you have this sort of, and this is kind of something that, I will most likely, like, touch upon multiple times, is that people are very, and, I am saying this in the most generic way possible, is that people are very stupid. They are going to see something, and if it looks cool, if it looks pretty, they're gonna want to hope it's great. And great, perfect example, Cyberpunk 2077. That game has been announced 8 years ago, right? And everyone has been just like, oh, this is going to be good. This is going to be great. This is overhype. And it gets to the point where it just becomes undeliverable. Meaning that whatever you create, even if it cures cancer, like your game cures cancer, you will not live up to the hype. And I think that's something that a lot of games need to not do. They need to not generate the hype unless they know that they would be able to deliver on it.
I think it depends. I think it depends, because here's an example that no matter how it marketed itself, it was going to fail and disappoint longtime fans. It was Kingdom Hearts 3. I absolutely adore Kingdom Hearts 3, right? I love that game. I love it. There are some disappointing aspects, though, as a longtime fan. And unfortunately, the reason for that is because that's well over a decade of video, like a decade and a half of video games worth building up to Kingdom Hearts 3. And it's impossible to live up to that, I think, because I just don't think it's possible to like do an entire like decade and a half worth of games, then do this third number title, which is supposed to end the current saga, and while also providing context for the new saga that's going to start on, and satisfy people.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's always those one things that you are right, it does depend on it, but I feel like it's always the new IPs or the one-offs, meaning that it is stuff that has not had prior IPs, a perfect example of like what you're talking about, of an IP that gathered too much hype, was Anthem. Yes. Oh god. Oh boy. That is like a fucking shit show that I will love to fucking rant about, but I'm actually gonna hold off on that, because primarily it's just. So it's like, one thing is that, I've been starting to work on like small little video essay type deals, because it's been something that I've kind of thought, what's the best way to kind of get my point across, but not always get my point across like repeatedly, like I don't have to say it over and over and over again. And so it's like, I actually have been working, and this is something, congratulations, you guys are the first to hear about this. I am creating another channel that goes over reviews as well as video essays, and self-promotion, yay, whatever. But that is one of the things that I will be talking about, on how it is something that it hurts. It really hurts, because I had like, initially I had like, oh, this looks like a somewhat of a cool game. Now, when people were saying it when they saw it, they were like, oh, this is a Destiny killer. I was like, I'm not going to say that they're right, but I will say that it is something that will show a new twist to it. Now, when the demo came out, I was like, okay, now it's time for us to check it out. I never played the demo. Like, I wish I was lying when I said this. I downloaded the demo. I launched the demo. I did not play the demo. I never had a chance of going into, like, an area at all for, like, 2 hours. And the one time that I went to the area, it was terrible. Like, I wish I had the actual stream of it.
I remember watching streams where people were stuck on the loading screen for 30 minutes. People would like leave, and like people would like leave, get up, go to the restroom or whatever to take a break. They come back and they are still on the loading screen. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh my god.
Yeah. And it was bad. It was terrible. And I think the one thing is that kind of just killed it for me. That killed the vibe. 100%. The fact that I had to wait 30 fucking minutes. And this is coming from someone who waits for Destiny 2 loading screens.
Well,
Like, how?
I did get a chance to actually play the Anthem demo when it came out. After waiting through a 30-minute loading screen. And then I got to play it. And then it's like a 5-minute mission. Then I'm done with it. 30-minute loading screen again. And I'm like, if this is how the full game is going to be, I'm not dealing with that.
It's just the one thing is like, and the main issue is that the main game wasn't any different. And I really, really hoped it was going to be changed. But the main problem was, and I feel like, again, this is going to be something of a consistent thing, is that, and I feel like this will be actually a kind of a way for us to go into it, but, you know, we'll touch on that part later, is that it's the fact that they were part of EA's publishing thing. And I say that because EA has a very, very bad rep. Meaning, if you are not getting that game done on a normal time frame, guess what, motherfucker? You're working twice or 3 times the allotted time that you expected. Due to crunch and in its magic power. And I hate that. I hate that so much. And I think that, again, that fucked it. That ruined it. And it was terrible. And I hate when good games fall flat on their ass. And it's something that it's like, I do not like. It takes a lot for me to say I do not like and agree with everyone else. Like, to give you an idea, I played through all of Cyberpunk. I have the entire Let's Play. I fucking loved it. Yeah, I had bugs. Yeah, it was fucking shit. But I still loved it. Fallout 76. That was a nightmare for Bethesda. That was a nightmare for everyone who's playing it. Did I still enjoy it? Yeah, I did. I did enjoy it. But the fact that Anthem did not do any, any benefits, any changes to it that made me want to go back to it, just kind of, like, it was just a failure. It was dead on arrival. Honestly, it was dead on demo, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But one thing that, kind of sticking with the whole kind of like the hype and all that, is something that actually, Sweet Tea Chibi has actually brought up, is the Final Fantasy VII Remake. And
so let's go ahead and talk about that, right?
Yeah.
Because with Final Fantasy VII Remake, when they announced it, we had barely any details, and then I think it was a few months after that, or sometime after that, in between that and when it came out, but before they actually gave us any, like, trailers, they told us it wasn't going to be a one-to-one remake. They told us that the gameplay was not going to be turn-based. So right off the bat, we already know it's going to be different somehow, story-wise, regardless of that being a small change or a big change. We knew it was going to be different gameplay-wise, whether that be like the Final Fantasy 15 or not. Personally, I like Final Fantasy 7 gameplay, the Final Fantasy 7 Remake gameplay, over the Final Fantasy 15 gameplay, because 7 Remake, I'm like actually able to do all these different button presses and all these different combos and stuff. Meanwhile, 15, I'm like, hold one button.
Yeah.
But with the 7 remake, at least with that, it didn't necessarily piss off people too much, because it came out and it was really good, right? But there was always that fear factor that if they remade the game, they weren't going to do turn-based. And even though there's a turn-based-esque system, which I hesitate to call turn-based, they still made sure to tell people way ahead of time, hey, don't expect this to be a turn-based game. This is not the Final Fantasy VII that you played originally. This is going to be different. It's new graphics, new gameplay. It's going to be a new twist to the story. Don't go into this expecting exactly what you got in, 1998?
Yeah. I think it was 97, I think?
97, probably?
It was 97 or 98. Let me actually look this up. Because I'm actually very curious. Let's see here.
Yeah, you're right, 7.
Yeah. Yep. And it's one of those things where that's what I always enjoy, is when you get that clarity, you get that transparency. Like, all right, we're making a remake. Guess what, guys? It's remade, meaning you're not gonna expect the same shit that you got last time. But
although at the same time, I think the problem is that when people hear remake, they don't quite know what that means. And that's because the gaming industry doesn't know what that means, like, at all. Because the gaming community will be like, oh, hey, this game's a remake, and then, like, there's basically nothing changed except for the graphics. Or,
Let's see what we've
this
got.
game's a remaster, and wow, there's a lot of new content in this game.
Yeah.
And it's
All
like,
right,
okay,
all
the
right.
the gaming
Let's see
industry
what
has
we've got.
skewed what a remake or remaster or HD port is, because, like, no one seems to know how to define it.
that's true. Also, one thing is while you were talking, shout out to Hisuga for the raid. Much appreciated, dude. And also, Ace, Waffly Spark, thank you for the follows. One thing that I want to say is if you're going to be following me, follow Sapphire. Sapphire is also here as well. Do follow him. We're going to be doing this as well. And do plug your stuff. Do plug your stuff.
I'm just not streaming it.
Yeah, he's just not streaming it right now, but do watch him. He is good. But once again, thank you very much for the raid. Hopefully your stream went well and everything is gone PogChamp.
Do you have a shout out command?
I think so. I think
Is it SO or shout out?
I think it's shout out. It should be shout out.
Okay, let me go ahead and do that then.
You wish you could follow twice? Don't worry.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. We got that. Awesome. Oh, you play with Sophia? Nice. But yeah, welcome to the first episode of our podcast. Yeah. It's this. If you didn't know in the beginning, we're starting to do this every other week. Because one, if we do it every week, it's just going to be, a lot of stress on both of us. Because even though, we wanted to do a podcast, we do have other stuff to do. Like, I have work, he has school. So, but we are still going to be, like, talking about all the, latest updates, and give our voices and opinions on that. And now, actually, speaking of which, of opinions, one thing that I would want to actually transition from is back to Outriders is story. The story is something that, because again, they remade and changed the way that Final Fantasy VII story is, but they still honored it. They still had the spirit of the original game in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the one thing is always a unique storyline. Now, you always have that moment where, in this case, with Outriders, it's just, okay, you wake up in a new world type deal, ravaged by war, and you become, like, the sole, like, defender or the peacekeeper, whatever. And you always have that feel like, this is, where I am. This is like, I have this responsibility. In Outriders, your guy does not give a fuck. It's great. And I think that's the best part about it, is because he was an Outrider. An Outrider had a job when he came into it. He was supposed to go to Enoch, scout the place out, and say, okay, this is good for humanity. He doesn't care about anything. He goes back into stasis, maybe. I don't know if we call it stasis.
Yeah, they put him into cryo.
Yeah, there you go, cryo. Stasis is now like everywhere. I don't know why.
I think they call it cryostasis in the
Yeah,
game.
yeah. But
so it's kind of basically the same.
But essentially, it's like 70 or 30, like a series
30
of
years.
decades. Yeah, like a series of decades go by, and he wakes up, and it's not like, oh my god, like this is what I have to do now. It's, well, I woke up. Now I need to find the fucking place that I actually live. Like, screw like everyone else. Like, this is my shit. And I think that's good. And because that seems more natural to me.
It's one of the few times we get to see a character who's jaded by not just Earth's destruction, but has to go through it all over again after. Because it's worse for him, right? Because like everyone's already been there for 30 years, so they've gotten time to adjust to everything. He gets on Enoch. He's awake for what, an hour or 2 hours, and then
I think so. Yeah, it's about like
and then like he's put into cryo because of the whole event.
Yep.
So he goes into cryo, wakes up 30 years later, finds out that the world that he was on, that they thought was
fucking got destroyed,
was a haven, has been destroyed with over 30 years, which for him
was like
him was basically just an hour.
Exactly. It's like, good. It's like literally for him it was, all right, this is a cool place. Now I'm going to go to sleep for a little bit. Goes to sleep, wakes up, realized the entire place got like blown to bits when he was gone, and literally the only thing that he knows is disappear. And the one thing is that he's just like, fuck. That's it. He's not like, oh my god, I'm having a mental crisis. It's, well, fuck. Here we are again. Part 2. That's it. And it's just like the way that he's portrayed and the way that everything is set up is that it's great because it brings its own like humor into it. Because you have him just running around doing like other stuff while also trying to get that, get to his ultimate goal. And you see where he's just, like, spoilers, but also not spoilers, because it actually doesn't really affect the story at all. But he takes down like a cult leader. All the cult members are like, oh, this guy's the new leader. He's just like, no, fuck off. Go! Like, he does not care. And it's just great because it's just like, you see, like, it's humorous when you just look at it and you always expect, like, oh, he will take up the reign. No, he just does not care. He's gonna, like, run away and just, like, fuck off and tell everyone, go, shoo. And it's just the way he does it. It's even better.
Yeah, it's interesting to actually see a character who's basically done with everything, because it's, we've seen characters go on, like, become jaded over time, or become jaded to the point where, like, they're frustrated. I don't know how many characters we've really seen where they're just like, screw it, like, I'm done with the bullshit. This is how we're doing it. No questions asked, and he just doesn't deal with crap. And the main character just doesn't deal with crap. Like, remember Bailey, the woman from Corrigan's camp who ends up coming with us?
Oh, yeah.
Remember how she's like, basically like, Chana thinks she's a spy for Corrigan?
Yeah.
And then our Outrider just doesn't give a damn about her knowing. He just straight up tells her what we're gonna do and tells her, "You want to come with us?" Then basically gives her an ultimatum because he's just not dealing with the childish crap of Chana and Bailey.
And I think that's always like the one thing that I always enjoy but never get to see, is because it's like, that is the most sensible thing you can do, is literally just shut them up and tell them it straight. It's like, all right, we're gonna do this. If you guys bitch and moan, guess what? I will leave you behind and you can go die for like all in a ditch. I don't care. It's not gonna affect me. It's not gonna affect, my team. It's only gonna affect you two. So if you stick with it, go for it. If you wanna, shut up and stick, actually like join me and help me out, congratulations, you get benefits. And that's it. Like, it's one of those things where he gives it to it straight. He doesn't care about anyone's feelings. And the only time he actually really does like show some kind of like human emotion is towards, his old teammate. And I think that and it's like, it's so natural when you see it too. It's not like, oh, this is force. It's like, the situation arised. What's going on? Like, again, like back to, the fact that we found Chana, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our guy does not know shit. Like, he doesn't know who that person is. But Jakob, his old teammate, who, wasn't in cryostasis, essentially raised her. And he's like, what's going on? And it's like, long story. And it's like, eventually you get like, you get pieces of information from him. But it's not like, okay, what's going on? Here's literally a tiny, huge list of what the expo is, right? You don't get that. You don't get like just a block of exposition for no reason. Like, it doesn't feel like unnatural. Like, here's the force it just because it's there, just for it. And I think that's always the one thing, is that people, like, it does not come that easily when you can actually just provide exposition without actually just providing the exposition. Like you don't go up to somebody and...
Now, I do just want to give a disclaimer.
Yeah.
Toxic is talking about basically early game. He's talking about basically the first half of the game.
Yes.
Because because even though I have completed it, Toxic technically hasn't yet, because he's only experienced the first half.
As of right
game.
now.
First half of the story, first half of the campaign game, all that.
So if you have like prior, like if you played through the game and you're like, this guy fucking doesn't know shit, and it's like, it's literally because I haven't seen it yet. I haven't experienced it. I haven't done anything with it. The farthest that we have gone is finding out that we were not alone. That's it. I'm going to leave it at that for people who have not seen it. I am going to be, like, a Let's Play is going to be going up soon of it. But that's where I am for it. Just to give you some context without spoiling anything, we are not alone. Take it as you want. If you see it as a spoiler, that's on you. But it's vague, because who knows? Baby.
The lore? The second half of the story, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but the second half of the story is a little weird. I'm still not 100% sure how to feel like it. Like, I liked it, but it goes in a little bit of a weird direction while still keeping the main character who's just like, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're, like, saying, but it's still the fact of, like, you still see that jadedness, and I already like where that's going, because it's not like, oh, he's fully developed. It's like, he still has that shit, he still does not care, because this is not new, but, it still kind of shows evolution, but it's likely when we get to that part, we get to that part. Now, we would definitely continue on with, that stuff, but just kind of to avoid spoilers for me as well as for, anyone who's watching, we are going to move on to the kind of the second thing that we wanted to talk about, and that is the just how the state of games are. Because when you really look at it right now, like moving away from just Outriders, you see Valheim. I think like 6 people, right? 6 people worked on that game, and they're millionaires. All 6 of them are millionaires at this point. Over like 20 some odd $million was generated because of how many people purchase it. Let me actually give you the right numbers for it, just to give you an idea. Let's see here. Yeah, it's like there's so many positive reviews. There's so much in with this. And let me see if I can actually get like, because they actually said how many copies were sold. Yeah, 5 million copies. 5 million copies.
Right, yes.
Now, remember, that's 5 million copies. And assuming they did not provide any reviewer codes, anything of that sort. And they, under the guise of Steam, which has, they take their 30% cut. That is approximately, because it's right now it's at $19.99, right? And again, Steam takes 30%. So that's about what? I think 14. Is it 14? Yeah, $14. That is $70 million. Split between 6 guys.
Oh, God.
6 guys. $70 million. And that is as of March 3rd. Last month. And they have sold 4 million copies in 3 weeks.
Dang.
And I want to also correct myself. 5 guys. 5 people made Valheim. 5 people. Meanwhile, you have Square Enix publishing a Marvel-based IP. And it is a fucking disaster.
So let's go ahead and talk about that, right? Because Marvel Avengers is a weird game. Because Marvel's Avengers, if I remember correctly, is made by a company that you would think would make a game that would be good, because it's by Crystal Dynamics. It's the company that made the Tomb Raider reboot games. So I don't understand quite exactly what happened here with Marvel's Avengers. Now, if I'm remembering correctly, Marvel's Avengers was supposed to be a collaboration of multiple different companies, not just Crystal Dynamics. But I don't know if that ever actually went through, or if it was just Crystal Dynamics that went through it.
So, to give you an idea, there are 5 companies, actually no, 6 companies in total. Granted, if you really want to go just by the brand names of the developing teams, it was 3. There was Crystal Dynamics, Crystal Northwest, Eidos Interactive, Eidos Montreal, and Nix's Software. That is 6 teams with a Square Enix publisher. With a multi-billion-dollar brand name. And let's bring up how many people are playing Avengers right now.
What's weird to me is that it seems to be a weird pattern that people seem to think that they can get away with doing the same thing that Destiny did, where they release a very bad vanilla and then fix it with like updates. But I don't think these companies quite understand the undertaking that they're doing when they do that. Because Marvel Avengers came out, and then the Kate Bishop DLC came out months later, and then we got a Hawkeye character months later, And in between though, in between all of that, there's basically no new content.
And so to give you an idea,
and even some of the content that did release is broken and doesn't work.
So let us actually, because here's what we're gonna do. I'm going to bring out the concurrent players of Outriders and the concurrent players of Marvel Avengers. Outriders, as of 20 minutes ago, you have 70.6 thousand people playing that are registered on Steam, with their peak all-time being about 125,000. And to give you an idea, 125,000 fills up, I think, the biggest stadium in the world. If I'm trying to remember exactly if it can house the biggest. Here we go. Let's see here. It has, so it can actually fill out the biggest stadium, and that is in North Korea, the Rungadro 1st of May Stadium, or known as the Mayday Stadium. And so it has a real capacity, and I'm saying real capacity because the supposed capacity is a little bit higher, but the real capacity is just under 114,000 people. Now, it doesn't seem like that's a lot. But again, this is a passion project. Their peak in the last 24 hours is 95,000. Just to give you an idea, that is a loss from within the span of, not even 2 weeks? Of only 25%. 25% of a player base loss. Not even. That's fucking great. If you have a game that literally is sticking with somewhere around that, that's awesome. Especially if you're that close to being still within the 100,000 player range. That's
especially
amazing.
When you consider the fact that the game is not live service.
Yeah, it's not live service. There's no thing of FOMO or anything of that sort. And then let's go over to Marvels, right? You think it's going to be huge. It's going to be massive. All-time peak, 28,000. 28,145 people. To give you an idea, I went to a college where my class, the class of 2020, was half that. Just think about it. My class of 2020 from college was half the all-time peak of Marvel's Avenger, and the highest amount within the last 24 hours, 1,128 players. That is more than 70% drop. And here's the kicker, though. They're saying, it's been out for a while. We go back to the original time. It went down super, super quickly. It is not fun. Within literally a span of a month, it went down by half. And it's still going down.
Yeah.
With a current player base, as of 20 minutes ago, 770. 770 players on a Marvel IP. Now, granted, Marvel games have just been very shit. Because...
Well, some of them have.
I mean, yeah, there's some few exceptions where it's I agree. But it's still the fact that, one, such a well-known name is only pulling 770 people to play their game. I don't know if, whatever the marketing was on how they fucked up. Because it's... Oh my god. I'm just impressed. I'm impressed. Oh my... Dude, average player base fucking dropped by 80% from September to October. 80%. And then an additional 40% on top of that. Just looking at these stats is actually just depressing. It's just, like, come on. And the issue is like, this is not a one-time thing. This is not something that is new. Right? There's so many other games that follow this same pattern. You have Stardew Valley, a game that's made by, I think, one person?
I have no idea. I've not really looked into anything Stardew Valley related.
If I remember correctly, I think it's made by, like, 1 or 2 people. But essentially what it is that it is just... That's it. Like, it's just 2 people, but everyone loves it. You see people playing it all the time. When major updates come out, you see, Stardew Valley become like one of the top streamed games on Twitch. And you have that feeling, and it's just like
I think it comes down to the fact that it really depends on what the end goal is. Like, let's say that we have because the problem is that really big companies, when they release video games, they're looking at how much money they can make it from it, and so they try to optimize that. And that's kind of why we have games as a service nowadays. It's because they want to go ahead and make one game and just make as much money as possible from it. Destiny 2 is an example of a game that makes extraordinary amounts from live service. MMORPGs are examples of this. Specifically, World of Warcraft, Star Wars: The Old Republic, Terra Online. They're all very lucrative, and the reason why they're lucrative is because of the different ways they monetize the game. And so...
And now we're kind of seeing that come into, the mainstream with, it started off with PUBG. And then what really kind of started the catalyst of it, Fortnite. Now, as someone who used to play Fortnite a lot, I fucking wish I took those hours back, honestly. Feel like I could have done something better with my life. But as someone who played it often, it was fun. But then, they started to bring in the Battle Pass, and then it just started to become if you wanted good stuff, you have to pay. There wasn't anything that kind of went, if you want to get stuff, you play a lot, right? Yeah, there was that option, but it literally made it where it's you have to play this literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to get close to finishing the Battle Pass. But if you wanted some other cool stuff, hey, guess what? You gotta buy it. And the issue is that model has now become the norm because, people have seen that this game is able to make billions of dollars off of just something so simple. A Battle Pass. $10, right? $10. And you're having somebody stick with that game to complete that, so they only can spend $10. But then then how would you do that? And then you get, your microtransactions. And then, lo and behold, we get to Destiny 2, they switch over to that system in 2018, right? Or is it 2019?
It was 19 because What do you mean? Okay, what do you mean? The free to play or?
Because it was during free to play when we went to the Battle Pass option.
Okay, then it would have been 19 because that's when Shadowkeep came out in September.
Yeah, and that kind of brought it into into Destiny 2. Now, granted, the way that Destiny 2 did it was in my opinion, the best way of doing it, because it wasn't like, oh, you have to complete challenges. It's, oh, just play the game. Earn XP. Do bounties. I mean, granted, we don't need to talk about that shit. That was a fucking nightmare. But it was still one of those things where it's very simple. Now, you have, like, you know, Fortnite. You have, now, Warzone, right? Warzone's coming into it. And, you know, they brought it in. And now it's like, you gotta spend time. A lot.
Call of Duty is in a weird
time.
place. Well, let's go ahead and talk about Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Yes, Call of Duty is in a weird place because it has 4 companies, 2 main ones and 2 side ones, essentially. The 2 main ones we know are Treyarch and Infinity Ward.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 side ones are Raven Software and Sledgehammer Games. I don't know what Sledgehammer Games is currently doing at the time, but I know that Raven Software has been put in charge of Warzone.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the one thing is that Sledgehammer was supposed to be a primary game maker as well. And they have gotten 2 games out. But, you know, news
I think
broke
they
out.
got I think they got sidelined because of the fact that those 2 games did so poorly, though.
I mean, granted, it was, you know,
because we're talking about Advanced Warfare and World War II.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And I think at that point it was kind of one of those, like, hit or miss options for them, because at that time, like, I would say, like, Advanced Warfare could have been the change that COD would have had, because, you know, you had Modern Warfare, you had Black Ops, and those were the huge ones, but those were, like, within, like, the near future, or, like, you know, on an alternate timeline of our present. But then you have, you know, Advanced Warfare that goes a little bit in the future, where it's like, you got additional movements. Now, granted, they were terrible. I didn't like it at all, but it was something new and something creative. Now, I think that was, like, where kind of everything kind of, like, shifted towards. And, you know, you saw that with Advanced Warfare. And then you saw the disaster called Infinite Warfare.
Advanced Warfare started something.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, Advanced Warfare was the first Call of Duty game to have loot boxes in it.
That is correct. It was. It was the first one to have loot boxes. No, actually.
I don't mean the first video game. I mean the first Call of Duty.
Yeah, no. It was not the. It was like the first COD in the franchise to have loot boxes. Now, they weren't stupidly egregious, but they were pretty bad. Like, it was kind of obvious, like, hey, you gotta spend money. And then, you know, Infinite Warfare was like, hold my beer, I'm gonna make this worse. And then you got that, and then, you know, they did that whole, like, they did the remaster, which was great, but you got loot boxes in there, and that kind of ruined the entire experience. Now, we fast forward over to Black Ops 4, which essentially was kind of their reset, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was good that they did a reset, because we kind of saw that it's like, you know, COD cannot be played on a multi-dimensional, like, plane. Unlike Respawn's, you know, fucking amazing game called Titanfall, which I'm holding my hope out. But, you know, they make another storyline type game. But, you know, back to COD, they did go in a good spot, but they were the first to try out their new kind of battle royale type deal, Blackout. Blackout could have been something. Honestly, it could have been Warzone. It could have 100% have been Warzone. But
I think the problem is that Blackout was basically a last minute decision.
Yeah, that was the thing about that.
But, so, like, if it had been properly developed, it probably would have been a thing. But because it was a last-minute decision, it was just kind of thrown together.
Yeah, and I think the one thing is that in the end, when Infinity Ward, got the reins again, they realized what they had to do. And they took it, and it worked. Because the way that I saw it is that, after the catastrophe of Infinite Warfare, and this was under new management. Infinity Ward, just to give you some background, was initially staffed by the people who are now part of Respawn. And they left Infinity Ward near the end of Modern Warfare 3. And so, after Modern Warfare 3, it became, its own, it's a new version of Infinity Ward. And now, not a lot of people kind of realized that in the beginning, because they are like, oh, it's a new, they made Modern Warfare 3. But that was because it was old, Infinity Ward at that time. Not new Infinity Ward.
Yeah.
And so when Infinite Warfare came out, they saw what new Infinity Ward was making. And oh boy, it was a disaster. And I think the one thing is that really kind of they had salvaged it was through Modern Warfare. Because unlike, going back to the original, becoming an original design, because, we saw how that went down, they went back to the OG. The time where you can get a nuke. Where you were able to EMP somebody. Where you were able to, you had the TTK where essentially you can do stunting with sniper rifles. And they went back to that. And honestly, way I see it, that was the best choice that they made. Because one, it was a reboot, so to speak, of Modern Warfare. It was the new Infinity Ward's version of Modern Warfare. And they took a lot, they still stuck with the same, aspect. There were still a ton of controversial points in there. To give you an idea, you have, if you haven't played through Modern Warfare, there was the attack in Piccadilly Square in the middle of London. They had, use of essentially sarin gas. It, in the past type deal.
Yeah.
And it still went off of that shock factor that we had back in Modern Warfare and Modern Warfare 2. And I think that was always something that's really good about it, was because it wasn't the fact of, oh, this is something that can, oh, this is too... these are based off of stuff that can happen,
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that, granted, a lot of people still had a lot of issues with it. Short TTK essentially means if you saw first, you win. That was the whole genesis of that. And it made sense. And I get that. And I think the one thing is because they had Warzone in mind. Because you had such a super fast time to kill in the original, Modern Warfare, is that when it came to Warzone, they knew that they had to slow it down. And the difference and the thing that really that made the Warzone succeed while Blackout failed is they increased TTK on a short TTK. Meaning that it takes longer for the time to kill, but it's not, it's not like, oh, it takes... As example, it takes 1 second to kill somebody. They're not extending it to 3 seconds, right? It's 0.5 seconds to 1.5 seconds. Now, granted, that doesn't sound like a lot, but in the heat of the moment, it could change like that. And I think that was the one thing that they did very well. Now, that being said, after they tried to do that, I think what happened is that now they started to realize, okay, this is the standing point. This is where we're going to focus down on. But they still needed to pump out games. And I think that's kind of where we are now with Cold War. Because if you actually go into Cold War, it still has a very slow time to kill compared to Modern Warfare. But you bring those weapons into Warzone, the Cold War weapons, it feels like they were in Modern Warfare. And I think that right now they actually have that formula set down properly, where they can stick that as a live service model, but still make games and still churn out, because people are always going to buy it. Now, sticking with kind of like just Call of Duty and just like AAA titles, I feel like it's just one of those things where it shows huge difference between what a AAA and what an indie developer is.
Yeah.
Because just so you guys have an understanding of what a AAA developer is, like a AAA game, right? A AAA game is essentially, hold on, let me actually let me get this for you. So a AAA game is a classification that's used for that is produced and published by essentially the same company. So if it's produced by Ubisoft and published by Ubisoft, AAA game. If it is published by Activision, made by Activision, even if they're using like Infinity Ward, Treyarch, it's still considered a AAA game because Activision is the one that's, initiating it for them. They're the ones that are actually doing it. Now, that's what a AAA game is. Now, a AA game is essentially, it's something completely different. A AA game is a game that is, it's an independent studio, just like People Can Fly, but it's backed by a huge publisher, Square Enix. And so it's one of those things where it gets into that point where, you look at it and you always are trying to think here, it's like, okay, and that's just kind of like a simplification of it, is that AAA is everything's in-house. Publication, publishing, development, publication, all in-house. For AA, it's you have an independent company who's going to a publisher and asking them, hey, could you publish this? And that's that. And then a single A game, if I remember correctly, is, let's see here. Let me see if I can actually figure this out. Oh yeah, so a single A game is essentially one where it is something where it is marketed, but it's still kind of, small. It's still made by an independent studio.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times you would see those as, granted we can't use Cuphead, but if Cuphead was not, published by Microsoft, that can technically be classified as a single A. People Can Fly, if they were the ones to market it and have it be sold in GameStop as a physical copy, that would be considered a single A. Now, and then we look at, at indie games. Indie games are just completely independent. Like, they have nothing to do with that. Where it is just, it's one of those things where it kind of is in that point where it is an indie game. It's made by an independent publisher, and they just send it kind of out onto the marketplace. Like, if you see it on Steam, you see it's like all the indie games, all those guys, they're not being published by a huge major backer. You see Devolver Digital, they publish indie games. If I remember correctly, that's what they primarily do. It's either indie games or like single or AA games. And so I think that's one of the things that really kind of classifies and kind of should be something that people should expect and should look into it. Because, like I said before, we have AAA games with huge budgets, knowledgeable people, and, creative directors that, that these companies can buy. But then in the end, because of the way that, everything has gone through and what their focus is, it kind of gets into that point where it ruins the game. You see Anthem, you see like how I mean, honestly, you could technically say it's, the same as Cyberpunk, right? Fallout 76.
Yeah.
Like, granted, yes, that is, like, but it's still, like, Cyberpunk, CD Projekt Red is still actually a publicly traded company. So, quote unquote. It's a privately traded company, but it's still, they still have backers. They still have shareholders. And so, that's always the one thing, is the focus of it. And that focus always is something that will really fuck people over. Because when we actually look at it, and you look at it very clearly, especially within this realm of now, people who focus on trying to make money will not make money at all. And I think that is definitely something that, it's kind of the comeuppance. But if you put in the passion, you put in the time, you put in the effort, and you don't, like, really have that, it's like, oh, it's successful, great, awesome, but I want to be proud of it. And it's noticed. You have Valheim. You have Stardew Valley. And you have so many other indie games that have grown and exploded to the point where, they're household names, essentially. It's like, if I had a kid and, they wanted to, like, oh, what would be a game that I can, like, start playing? I would introduce them to Stardew Valley. Because it's a really good game. It's solid. There isn't any issues with it at all. And also, it's, it shows, there's passion behind it. And you really can tell that there's passion behind it. And I think that's always the one thing that, you don't see in Call of Duty. You don't see in, well, obviously you don't see it in any fucking sports game from fucking EA, because all that's a copy-paste with, like, yes, loot box!
EA is a weird, like, when it comes to the sports thing, there's, like, I don't quite understand what it is about sports games that people like, because, like, when I see a sport game, all I see is, like, a copy-paste of the previous one. And I guess you could probably apply that to a lot of different genres. But
yeah,
it feels like sports games are the most guilty of doing that.
And I think the only, and this is 100% my opinion, this is not a fact at all, my opinion is that out of all the sports games, racing is the only one that breaks that mold. Because yes, a lot of the times it's you're in a car and you're driving fast. But at that point, like, racing games, and this is also kind of goes back to how I started, because before FPSs, before, shooters, before looter shooters, before story games, before all that, my first game that I got hooked on was the OG Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2. And at that time, it was primarily because the cars. It wasn't the racing, it wasn't, like, the racing was fun, but it was just the fact of, like, I had the appreciation of cars at that time. And I still do. And it's always one of those things where it's like, if I see a good racing game, I will play it, I have Forza Horizon 4. I love it. I used to, like, record a lot of it. I don't do it right now, but because, like, I kind of already done anything. But as soon as something new comes out, like a new car, I want to get it. I want to play it. And it kind of also shows in the different types of racing. Because there's not just generic racing. There's arcade racing. There's simulation racing. There is, there's intense racing. Then there's racing that's not even considered racing, because you have like the dirt rally or rally cross games. Those can be races or time trials. You have F1, where essentially it's you are racing your car, but you upgrade your car. You're competing against different teams, and you're trying to make sure that your car is faster than them, and you know how to use your car to go quicker than them. And then you have, Forza Horizon 4, which essentially is just like, have you heard of car porn as a game? Here it is. Also, bring your friends along. And it's just that feeling where it's like, and in, a lot of people are like, why'd you enjoy racing games? They're all like the same. It's like, you're right and wrong at the same time. Because it is something that is hard to really explain. But it's, once you get into that, like, the car community, you feel like, okay, this is all.
Well, I mean,
it's
in
okay.
the end, in the end, I guess like the reality is that like it's the whole. Not every genre is for everyone. Like I don't understand the whole sport genre. I'm not a fan of the racing genre. I know you are, but personally, I'm just not a big fan of the racing genre.
Nah, I get that.
And I think that's because like when I playing games, like for whatever reason, every time I try and play a racing game, I just, no matter how many hours I put into it, it just never, things just never really like click for me. And the only kind of racing games I can really play are like kart racing games, like Mario Kart.
Yeah,
or,
like arcade racers.
Yeah, like arcade racers, essentially, like Mario Kart or the what is the
Sonic one? So it's like Super
Well,
All-Star
there's
Racing?
There's Sonic Racing Transformed.
Oh yeah, that's that. There's that. Yeah.
But the Crash Bandicoot one.
Oh right, I was like, it's double. Hold on, let me actually look that up.
Here's a flashback to the past for those of you who may remember this or not. The Star Wars, I can't remember what exactly what it's called. The Star Wars one, though.
Crash Team Racing. It was Crash Team Racing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah,
and
there was a really old Star Wars one though.
Star Wars racing game. It is literally called just Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. That was it.
Racer isn't the one I'm talking about. That one's a legitimate racing game. I think the one I'm thinking of was Star Wars. Is like Bombad Racing, I think.
There's Star Wars Racer Revenge. That's. Let me see here. Like, I'm actually trying to look this up. But it's and I think that's the one thing. That's always the one thing, and this is something that I always would, always enjoyed about racing, is that racing is a very simple thing. It is very straightforward, very easy to get. You have vehicle, you go fast, round track, or round, like, whatever the course is, and you beat everyone else. And it's that simplicity of it that can literally just go into everything else. Like, you know what? Let's put in power-ups. Boom, Mario Kart. Or, you know what? Let's make it, very, very realistic. Alright, sim racing. Okay, we like sim racing. Why don't we also bring in the aspects of team management? F1. Or, other types of... And it's like, it expands, and I love it. And that's why I'm like, because it's always one of those games where it's like, it's very easy to see it as just, okay, it's a normal racing game, but then you really look at the spectrum of it, and there's so much more to it. Meanwhile, if you guys like sports games, if it's not NBA The Street or NFL The Street, or the fucking SSX snowboarding games, I don't know what the hell is wrong with you. I'm sorry, but it literally...
I think the only sports game I've ever really been able to play was like the Mario and Sonic Olympics.
Yeah. Well, that's just straight up, like, competitive sports stuff. But I do agree with that. Like, that's the same for me. Because now it's like, those are the only games, sports games that I'll play. Because a lot of the times, it's, you're playing against somebody, like, you're playing with someone else. Like, that's how I've always done it, and you always have that moment of, like, oh, you could get this far, or you could get through that. Meanwhile, you have FIFA over here, like, alright, I'm playing with it, go! Reset, play, go! Like, I understand, like, it is... it is a huge thing. And it's like, oh, you can build your team. But the problem is building your team is not, oh, you work at it, you purchase players, you trade and all that. It's, hey, you have money? Here's a gift card. Like, here's a pack of cards that you may or may not get the person you want. It's only $10. You just need to steal your parents' credit card.
So we've gotten so far away from the original point.
I think that's always the good part. That's always the thing about that. Again, this is the one thing. We have train tracks, right? Guess what? We diverge from them. We go on tangents. We go everywhere.
I feel like that's every podcast. So like every podcast, for some reason, will like have they'll set a list of topics to talk about beforehand, and then they'll start talking about it, right? And then like at some point they'll just go off on a tangent and they'll go to a completely different thing. And you got a podcast.
I mean, hey, that seems like it's the best type of podcast. Let's be real here. Like, you got, it's just, oh, something right there and then. Okay, cool, great. So this is what we're going to be talking about. Hey, by the way, remember this? And then, ooh, there's that topic. And I think that's always the one thing that is always good about them. But back to sports and how fucking stupid they are. They're literally just money machines for that. And that's kind of the back to the basics of why I do not think that, AAA games have the same prestige as they used to back in the day. Because when you heard of a AAA game, you're thinking, oh, that's going to be a good game. It's backed up. And there were games that actually, fit that at the time. You got Battlefield. Battlefield was fun back in the day. I still remember putting hours upon hours on end on 1942 back when it first came out. And my God, that's an old ass game. I was super young at that time. I think I was, what? I don't even think I was like 10. That's kind of a bad parenting thing, but hey, I turned out all right. And you have this huge thing, and it's like you got, and again, let's go a little bit more, what kind of really brought up everything. You got Halo, right? Halo, fucking amazing. Bungie put Bungie on the map as a fucking great, great developer. And then you have Infinity Ward with their Modern Warfare series. And then you have, Treyarch with their zombie stuff. And at that time, it was all something that, it was unique. It was cool. Then you had, games that didn't, fit the franchise model. You had stuff from Ubisoft. I mean, granted, I came into Ubisoft a little bit later than most, but there has been, you got Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed is amazing. Like, it's one of those things where it was seen as, it's a band of, a badge of honor. And I think that's always the one thing that, we always kind of had that expectation of. And I think that is also our downfall. Is because at that point, AAA titles are not meant to be good. Like, that's their primary focus. But in the end, it's how much can we sell? It's not how do people like it. It's how much can we sell? And I think that is the huge detracting factor about this. And people do not understand it as well as I wish they did.
And it's basically the reason why indie games have gotten so popular recently. Is because of the fact that, AAA games keep doing this thing where it's like, oh yeah, we'll release this game, it's going to be live service, or it'll have microtransactions or something in it, and people will be like, nah, I don't want that. And then they'll move over to, an indie game or a AA game or something that actually looks more interesting and doesn't have, all the bullcrap in it.
Outriders. Valheim.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. What other ones can we pull? Honestly, you can technically say Rocket League. Technically.
Yes, I know. It has skins.
It does, yes. Agreed. But it's still one of those games where it did bring in
so I'm pretty sure, doesn't Rocket League have a battle pass?
Well, now they do. But in the beginning, they didn't. It was literally just car soccer.
Hmm.
Like that was the whole concept of it, and
I
now
think
it's
there
more
are
of a-
companies that like
an
we
open.
can kind of like. I think there are companies that we can kind of rely on to like know what they're going to do, and
Yep.
companies that we like are a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
One a double-edged sword is always going to be EA essentially because like
Yes.
you have all these different companies, some of them like Dice or BioWare, but you never know what's going to come out of those two companies, whether or not it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing.
You have Mass
Like,
Effect, and then Dragon Age, and now you have Mass Effect Andromeda, which is good.
let's talk about Andromeda, right? I liked Andromeda. I'm not saying it's a good game. I
Yeah.
loved Andromeda. That's not to say it's very good or anything, because the story was or is not exactly good. The decision making is weird because it's not really. It's basically just a more complicated way of saying this is good, this is bad. We're not gonna let you know which one's the Paragon or whatever. Have
Yeah.
fun figuring out what to do, but also at the same time, yeah, your choices matter even less in this than they did in any of the previous games.
Well, I don't know if you can really say that. I mean, like, okay, and this is also like this is kind of a very good example of it.
I don't know
Mass
if
Effect.
I don't know how many endings Mass Effect Andromeda has. Let me look this up while you go on with
Yeah, so
whatever
it's
you're saying.
like you have the Mass Effect, the original trilogy, right? And they actually are coming out with like a remaster. All those choices, all those points that you went to. 3 endings. 3 fucking endings. 3 games. 3 endings. That's it. And to give you an idea, Cyberpunk is a single game, a story in and of itself, has up to 5 endings. And I'm saying up to 5 endings. Because if you don't do everything, you can get 4. If you don't do specific things, you can get 2. And if you literally just speed run the main story, you only get 2. You can get 3 if you do certain side activities. But again, it's up to how much you play and how much effort you put into the game. And that is something that I think is really good about Cyberpunk. That Mass Effect, in my opinion, failed on. And again, that kind of shows, as well as just the amount of remakes. Like Sony just recently announced that they're remaking like The Last of Us.
I thought that was just a report, not a announcement.
Wait, hold on.
Did they actually announce that?
Hold on. Let me make sure. I don't wanna just give the wrong information here. But it's also the fact of like, let's see here. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. So it is reportedly they're remaking The Last of Us for PS5. But it's still the fact of the thought is there. Like, dude, I'm sorry, but fucking stop with the remasters. You're a huge ass company. You can make whatever game you want. You can hire whatever developing company. But no. You decide to remake Last of Us. Bethesda decides to remake Skyrim over and over and over. It is so bad that you can play it on a fucking Echo. And I wish I was lying. That was actually a thing that they announced.
Looking up the stuff regarding Mass Effect Andromeda, my brain is just like flush. It's just everything's coming all the way back into my head, and I'm like, wait a minute. There's not actually all that many endings.
Yeah.
In Andromeda.
But it's just like The Last of Us has been remade from PS3 to PS4 to now reportedly to PS5.
Well,
Reportedly.
okay, let's go ahead and like as far as The Last of Us goes, it had a remaster. So if we think in terms of remake, I'd imagine they're probably going to remake it to have the graphics of the probably Last of Us 2.
Yeah, I think it's likely of that, but it's still just the fact of this remaking remasters. Come on, guys. Like, make something new.
Well,
Like,
they are.
okay, I mean like a new IP, not based off of that, you know? Like having a remake from a game that is like 20 plus years old. I get that. I can understand that. Like the Ratchet and Clank, Final Fantasy, for example. That, yes, you want to remake those because those are very good games back then, and you want, to see how they will stand up to now. I can understand that. But the game's not even 10 years old.
I mean, I agree it's weird that they're getting a remake of it, but the idea that Sony's not having new IPs when literally just like how long ago did Ghost of Tsushima come out?
Let's see here, but
On top of the fact that later this year we're supposed to be getting Returnal.
That's true. It came out last year, July 17th.
There you go. We got a new IP last year. We're getting a new IP this year with Returnal.
But I think the one thing is that it's just the fact of like, I do love the fact that we're getting more IPs, we're getting new stuff, but I feel like it shouldn't, we shouldn't just feed the same like let's look at GTA 5, for example. How many times has that game been friggin' remade? Or remastered or updated? First it was on the Xbox One.
I don't know how many times they've done it, but
Hold on.
GTA is definitely a weird one where I don't know what Rockstar is doing with it. They're probably trying to keep it GTA 5 alive as long as they can until they can get GTA 6 out.
So to give you guys an idea, 2013, that was when the game came out. September 17th. It's on the PlayStation, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3. They remade it for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. And now they remaking it again. Or, well, not remaking it, but updating it again for Xbox Series X as PlayStation 5. Like, it's one thing to kind of like keep it, like, bring it up and up and up. It's like, there's a point in time where it's just like, I don't want to see just, like, announcements from 2K being, hey, we're updating the same game that we released, like, 8 years ago. Yeah! Like, I hate listening to that. I hate it. Because it's one of those things where it's like,
I mean, I think it depends on the game, right? Because I think if the game came out during the PS3 era, I could maybe understand it getting remade on the PS5.
Yeah,
because that's a pretty huge leap. The thing about The Last of Us is that even though The Last of Us got a remaster, the graphics really didn't get improved all that much.
yeah.
So there is probably an argument that could be made that if they were to remake it in graphics using The Last of Us 2 graphical style, and with the reality that it would look even better though because of the fact that it's on the PS5 and not the PS4. Yeah. You could probably make that argument, but at the same time, it's like it feels like they're doing it purely because of the fact that Last of Us is purely because they want to get Last of Us back in the news On top of the fact that Last of Us just had that thing with the TV show. Was it a TV show or movie?
I think it was a movie.
Whatever live action thing they're doing, which I think I have no faith in, by the way, because live action video game stuff, live action movies, anime stuff, rarely ever works out.
Yeah.
Even the content that I like that's live action isn't very good for it. Like, I like the live action Assassin's Creed movie, but it is by no means a good movie.
I think the one thing is that live action, like, as much as I love live action stuff, which, you know, is always a good thing to see. Video games, it's so hard to do. It really is. The only one that I feel did it very well is Detective Pikachu. Because it's not based off of the game, it's based off of the universe.
Well, Detective Pikachu, isn't it based off of the Detective Pikachu game?
Oh, you're right.
But even then, it was a good movie.
It's great. I mean, granted, yeah,
Has there ever been any game movies besides Detective Pikachu that were good?
I'd say Mortal Kombat was
The first one, maybe.
the first one. Yes, first one.
We'll have to see how the new one goes.
That's Alien. Alien was I wouldn't say is a game. Game adaptation.
No, I would not. I would not go for that at all because Alien was a movie first.
Yeah, but I think that one thing is that
in fact, Alien is a perfect example of the reverse.
Yes, 100%.
Where adapting a movie series or universe into a game was not working for some reason. There's very few Alien games that are good. One of those being Alien Isolation.
Honestly, it's the only reason why I will never play that game is because primarily I'm too shit scared of it. There is very few things. I played Outlast 2. I will play, I've played Soma. I've played Fear. Going through all that. Dead Space. I fucking love those games, especially the horror aspects. I don't want to play that because goddamn, that is horrifying to me. Just thinking about it. Oh, by the way, guess what? Your enemy is not a static 2D character with just normal logic. It develops. It fucking develops a brain. Hey, you use vents a lot? Guess what? It's gonna hide there now for you. Oh, you hide in, lockers?
Well, there are ways to outsmart it.
I mean, yes, but it's still the fact of that whole, the development part where it's just like, it's a smart girl. Because you always have that thing of oh, it's not gonna find me.
It's like the Jurassic Park scene.
Exactly, yeah.
The hunter turns around.
Doors opening.
He goes to shoot the raptor. He goes there and he sees that there's nothing actually there. He turns around, and then he looks to the side and there's a raptor. He's like, clever girl. And then it jumps on him and kills him.
Yeah. And it's like
because it just outsmarted him.
Yeah, and I think it's always that fact. It's because that is why I want to play it, but also I don't want to play it. Because it's because I love the fact when it's you have games that are trying to outsmart the player. But then it's also the fact of I don't want to play it because it's just dude, I'm gonna shit myself. This safe spot is not a safe spot.
The thing about Alien Isolation is that it's a little weird.
It is.
Not in the sense of its horror, because I think the AI was mostly done well, if a little iffy at times.
Yeah.
The problem with Alien Isolation is that it kind of, at some point, kind of drops a horror element for 7 hours of the game. And it's really... I don't know if it's actually 7 hours, but for a good chunk of the game, it drops the horror element. and even though you're still like, it becomes purely a survival game, and
Yeah.
then it brings back the horror element. But it during that period of time, you're like, am I even playing the same game anymore?
Yeah.
And even then, the whole thing with Alien is like if you play after like 2 to 3 hours of dealing with like the alien, you're like, all right, I'm just done with your crap. I'm no longer scared of your crap.
Yeah. I think the one thing is that, I feel like, wasn't there a movie that came out called Free? Was it Free Guy? Or it's some might be still in production, but essentially it's like it's Ryan Reynolds as like it stars as an NPC. And it's just like, oh, going through the daily life of an NPC in GTA 5, essentially.
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, Free Guy. I think it was Free Guy or The Guy. I forget what it was, but it was something of that sort. Let me see if I can find it.
I don't think I've heard of this movie before.
What? Free Guy. Yeah, Free Guy. Okay, did it come out yet? It has not. That's why. It is so Free Guy essentially what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a like Ryan Reynolds was playing an NPC. And what happens in it is that he is like a bank teller, and you know how GTA 5 has
he just randomly becomes sentient, I'm guessing.
Yes. He does. He becomes sentient and essentially just like tries to figure out like what the hell is going on. And it's great. It's just like the thought of it is like it's so good. Granted, I mean, I'll watch it because it's it's Ryan Reynolds, but it's still just a fact of you have this kind of idea of it. Oh, I also, one thing that I did want to talk about, this is very, very funny, is that there was a journalist that,
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Like, the whole talk about the horror games actually allows us to talk about that easier.
And so, because I just thought of it. So, if you guys didn't know, there was actually a tweet back a couple of weeks last week, that came out from a journalist, I think is it the Huffington Post or the Washington Post? It was one of those. And essentially what it was the fact of what would be the setting for a horror game that you'd think would be the worst. And her argument was, because someone brought it up, it's like it would be space. Because you have no fucking clue what's there. And her argument is like, if it is in space, it's not considered a horror game. It's considered a sci-fi game. And I think the one thing is that I can understand where she's coming from, but also there's so many examples that kind of just, I wouldn't say prove her wrong, because technically what she is saying can be classified as somewhat correct, but also does nullify the whole it can't be like a horror game type deal. Like, it can't be just a sci-fi, like it can't just only be sci-fi, And I think it's always one of those things where it's like we look into that, and you kind of also look into what makes a horror game. Because it's not yes, it is the atmosphere, but I think it's also like multiple different other things. Like you have, for example, let's talk about Dead Space, because we've gone through Alien Isolation, and so Dead Space is.
Speaking of that tweet, I saw people in the argument in the below that tweet, kind of like talking about how like if it doesn't like actually involve space, that it doesn't count, and I'm like, well, that's kind of dumb, because like, hello, like how else are they supposed to really be in space? And they're like, oh well, Alien 1 could have just taken place on like a on like a station on a planet. I'm like, not really, considering how it ends and the fact that the space station, it being a space station, plays fairly well into the plot of the first movie.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think the one thing is, and this is like in retrospect of the game, of, and I feel like, honestly, I think a really good game adaptation, like for a movie, Dead Space. And hell, I would rather see it as a show. I think that's the one thing, but it's just the fact of, it's not only like something in space, but it's also the way that it's kind of like portrayed.
Dead Space is a perfect counter to that whole thing I was talking about, right?
Oh,
the
yeah.
whole, like, if it doesn't directly take place in space, like, hello? There are moments in Dead Space where you have to be outside in space.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that shit's like horrifying as well.
It adds a very tense atmosphere to it.
Yep.
But, it's so weird to me, the idea that it being in space means that it's sci-fi. Like, why is it that, like, we can't have sci-fi horror? Like, what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
And even then, I wouldn't exactly call Dead Space sci-fi, because even though it's partially science fiction, it leans more into the fantasy horror element.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, yeah, you have essentially the whole thing of just the feel of, you have the, like, it is sci-fi, you are part of like a multi-space, like, multi-colony, like, race now, and you have the ability to essentially be able to just go in exosuit out, and you won't have to be like superly fucking fit. You don't have to be, you can be just a normal fucking engineer and go out. You don't have to be trained like as much as we trained before. And so it's one of those things that, you have the fact of, and I think this is one thing that really kind of makes, Alien Isolation, and not only, like, in one huge compartment of it is that it's always someone who is not trained. Meaning it's like, it's not a military guy. It's never a military guy. It's never somebody who's a security guard. It's never somebody who is, a hunter who can, like, make sure that they're able to kill what they see.
I think that's kind of what makes Dead Space 2 and 3 more interesting, because 2 is like, it's no longer someone who doesn't know what they're doing. It's someone who is like, who has experienced these things and has lived through it and now has experience and can kind of hold his own against it. While he's still not part of the military, because of the fact that he's had this horrible experience, he's able to fucking fight these things now without an issue.
And I think, and honestly, I feel like out of that entire Dead Space series, the second one is my favorite, because when you look at Dead Space 1, right, it is strictly like, it is a horror game. It is fucking terrifying. I am just like, oh god, do not kill me. And then, you shine your flashlight. Hey, guess what? Xenomorph's like, what's up? Want to take a picture? And just shows up and beats the shit out of you without you reacting. And so 90% of the time, you're just holding up your flashlight and your gun, just ready. You're just ready for it. But then you have Dead Space 2, which kind of takes that and then kind of evolves it to where it's like, it's still horror, right? You still get those horror aspects, but it's also the fact of, because it kind of develops, like, Isaacs now has the experience that he had from Dead Space, from suffering in the Ishimura. Now that he's on, like, the space station, he has more stuff, and so you get, like, a more action mixed with that. And I think that's always a good thing, especially since, Dead Space 3, they toss fucking horror out the window unless you play with Carter. Like, it it's like a bittersweet thing. Like, I understand what Dead Space 3 was trying to be. Like, yeah, we want to make it seem like, yes, he now knows what he's doing. He essentially has become jaded to the whole thing. But it's still the fact of, like, there's so many unnecessary things in that game that, honestly, we can literally go on a fucking, like, rant for, like, 2 to 3 hours just on how bad, like, half of the like, critical elements are in the game. That it just does not make fucking sense. Just on Dead Space 3. But I'm gonna just focus on the one positive thing about it. Is that they go back to the horror element and still keep that feel of the action when you go through Carver's storyline. Now, Carver's storyline is one that you can only experience through co-op, which is, I feel like, a fucking disservice to anyone who doesn't have friends who own Dead Space 3. It is a huge disservice, and I feel like that needs to be rectified. But unfortunately, I think
Even doing it co-op kind of sucks, because if you're playing as Isaac, you don't get to experience the same things the Carver player does.
That's
Carver,
true too.
everything that happens to Carver as far as visions or stuff, only Carver sees that. You as Isaac, you have no idea. So as Isaac, you're really confused what's happening.
Yeah.
The same goes for Carver. Carver has no idea what Isaac is seeing in his visions either. So it's a weird, like, it's a cool element, but it's also really weird, because when the best element of your game is Carver's storyline, and the only way to experience that is to play it co-op on top of playing Carver himself.
Yeah.
One player is always going to be kind of stuck not being able to experience that really good part. Because Carver's stuff was absolutely amazing.
That's fantastic.
Isaac's stuff was garbage.
Yes.
Dead Space 3 should have just been purely Carver.
Honestly. Well, what the way that I would say it is that it should have been less of Isaac's stuff in the main game and more of Carver-esque things. Like, because when you play as Carver, you essentially get, like, a shit ton of visions, and also, like, you get PTSD, and it develops Carver's, like, his past, which is always a good thing. And I feel like the one thing that they kind of fucked up on is that they don't have that for Isaac at all. And that's something that fucking ruined it for me, because you still had that horror element in Dead Space 2 that was just literally everywhere in Dead Space 1. In 3, it's just like, it's gone. The only thing that matters is, like, oh yeah, the necromorphs are still there. Like, that's it. That's the only thing that has some sort of horror element into it. Necromorphs are there. They hide in vents. That's all.
Dead Space 3 just wasn't a horror game unless you were playing as Carver.
I hated the fact that it wasn't a horror game. Because the one thing that I enjoyed the most out of Dead Space was the horror aspect. And also, in Dead Space 2, it was the horror in action. And I feel like the one thing is that they just... It wasn't that
I think the other problem is, like, one of the reasons why Dead Space 3 doesn't really work as a horror game is because of the fact that it's co-op. If you play co-op, it's already a problem when you're doing solo and you don't really have the Carver stuff, and, like, it's a really action-oriented game instead of horror survival, which is a really weird choice to make. But it's even worse when you're playing with a second player, and because when you're playing it with a friend, when you're playing co-op, you're probably just making fun of everything or joking around and not paying attention to the horror atmosphere. So you already don't care about it in single player. So when you add a second player there and you're just joking around with your friends, that horror element's completely gone.
That is so true, though. I still remember when he fucking played through. He just, like, ridiculed everything. Just like, oh, here he is, just running at us, pop, pop, oh, he's gone. And it was one of those things, and I think the one thing that they could have done that would have kept that whole, like, experience of it is the isolation part. Is that because you know, in the entire time you're always with your friend. You're always like Carver is always with Isaac. That like they both went the same path. If you had it where they're forced in different locations, that would have, and like there's your horror element. One, you still would be able to get the horror element even if you were playing as Isaac. Because, you know, you're still alone, you're isolated, you don't have backup. But then two, if you have, you know, your friend with you, guess what? You still don't have backup. You're on your own. There is literally nothing that you would be able to do until you get past this. And I think that's something that they kind of missed the point on. And they missed that.
I think another big problem is the fact is that the game leans too much into the action side, and that's not necessarily a bad thing for a game to lean, for a horror game to have an action element. The problem is when the game is designed around horror survival and then it leans into action, and so it ends up being a point where because horror survival is supposed to be a thing where like I can go ahead and survive, I can make choices, but when it's leaning into the action side and action is very clearly clashing with the survival aspect, with the extremely limited ammo and limited guns and resources, it's like what was this design decision, Resident Evil 6?
Honestly though, what was it, man?
I'm sorry, I had to make the joke. I had to make the joke about Resident Evil 6.
No, it's I'm just not thinking of the fucking game. Oh my god, dude. I'm so okay. Let's actually talk about Resident Evil as well, because they went like in two different directions. Like you have 1 through 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
All had that horror aspect of it. 4 through 6 kind of just like slowly went away from horror and went into a fucking shit show that was fucking hilarious and just laughable half the time.
So here's the thing I want to go ahead and talk about, right? I never quite understand people when they tell me that like the first 3 games are like horror games, because they do have horror elements, but they focus more on survival and puzzle games than horror. I can think of very few rare moments where I was legitimately scared in those first few games. And it wasn't because of like actual horror, it was because like Resident Evil 1 and I'm like, oh well, crap, this random zombie just popped around the corner. This is not actually that scary, it was just a jump scare. Oh man, Resident Evil 2. Oh man, Mr. X. And oh man, Resident Evil 3. Oh crap, Nemesis. Oh my god.
So I think the one thing is that kind of like people like kind of coincided with horror is the survival part. Because a lot of the times what it is that, and this is something that you will actually see in a lot of games that, you know, don't explicitly say it's horror, but so many people really, you know, have that, is that you don't know how you will die. You know? In FPSs, you'll die by getting shot at or by an explosion. And, you know, in flying games, you die because someone, like, you know, you crash into something. Or you were shot out. In like survival games, you don't know what's gonna kill you.
I think what people just wanted from Resident Evil was the survival aspect. Like, that was the whole reason why people loved it. Like, I see a lot of people complaining, like, oh, well, they should just go back to the fixed camera. No, shut up. Fixed camera, it sucks.
I hate that.
Suck. I'm okay with playing them because they're old games, but you give me a game nowadays like fixed camera with 10 controls, I'm not going to play it. Fixed camera with good controls? Sure. But fixed camera with the dank controls, absolute garbage. But new Resident Evil does not need to be fixed camera for it to be good.
It really doesn't.
People were like, "Oh, well, that's why it was scary." And I'm like, if the game's only way of being scary is by using fixed camera, it's probably poorly designed horror.
It is. Okay, and I think again, this is something that really kind of makes it very, very obvious, is that a good horror game gives you a false sense of control. Like, Outlast. Outlast gives you that false sense of control because it's quote-unquote open world, but guess what? You have to go down a specific path. And you don't really notice that you're going down that specific path until you really just think about it. It's like, wow, I literally just like walked in a straight line for progress. Granted, you're trying to avoid being fucking shanked or, you know, your nuts are getting, becoming castrated in the DLC. But it's still the fact of you're still being forced to go in one direction. But in Outlast, it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like you are doing that. As well as Isolation. As well as, the more recent Resident Evil 7. You have to do this thing, but it's not something that you're forced to do immediately. It is something where it's like, yeah, you gotta go. But guess what? We're not gonna, tell you you can't do it, but you're gonna have to do it regardless. It gives that false sense of, of open worldness. A game that honestly I feel like kind of went under the radar, Evil Within 2. Oh my god, that game. So if you haven't played Evil Within is a very interesting game, primarily because it has the same thing of just the horror aspect as well as the action. But in Evil Within 2, you are essentially in an open world. But the thing is that open world is filled with shit that will kill you super fast unless you know what you're doing. And so unless you have experienced it, you have gone through the game, you don't know what the fuck will kill you that quickly. Yeah, there's going to be enemies that you can easily take on and all that. You still have that, that sense of open worldness. But, there's certain locations that don't open up to you because the enemies there would fucking deck you in literally 2 seconds. And I think it's, again, that whole fact of, it's that false sense of control. And that's always the one thing that I think is really good about it, is because it's, oh yeah, this is, here's your toy, but guess what? This isn't your toy. This is essentially something that you can try and get, but you're still gonna do what I want you to do to get said toy, thinking you're gonna get the toy.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I think that's always the one thing that a lot of horror games really need to kind of disguise, because you have that point where it's another one, and we're going back to into indie games. Subnautica is a game where if you are scared of the water, congratulations, you're already prepared. But what Subnautica does is that it gives you this open world, but it forces you to go into spaces that you would not have gone into. Again, you can legitimately just have your fun in your little small area of safetiness, but for you to actually go in and get more understanding of what's going on and, actually have an attempt to get out, you have to dive deeper into the game. And I mean, that literally. And you do not know, what you're seeing, and that is in literally the first 100 meters of diving down. It is hard for you to see that close. You could see silhouettes, but that's only if you have the right settings and the game is glitching out. Outside of that, you can be at literally, not even 10 meters underwater, and there's a jump scare. There are locations like that, where it's safe water, but guess what? Jump scares right there.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And it's one of those things where, unless you have like set up. Like, to give you an idea, you can go through the game, and I think you can speedrun it. Like, if you get everything, it takes about like 2 to 3 hours, right? But if you don't know what you're looking for, what you're doing, good fucking luck trying to finish that quickly. Like, for me to finish it, it took me, I think, about at least 20 hours to do. Because I half the time was me prepping myself to go and journey down there. Like, to go down deep. And it's, you know, it's not only that survival aspect of it, but also it's just the fact of you have no fucking clue where you need to go. And the worst part is when you find out where you need to go, oh right, there's a huge ass thing that can destroy you. And I'm not just saying just you. You get vehicles. They will dismantle those like they're fucking pieces of paper. And it's always that, like, the insecurity of, I might be in this, but I am not safe. I might be in this very huge-ass Cyclops, which is a massive submarine, but I'm not safe. And it's that aspect of, you know, of that false sense of, you know, of free, sort of like free will, in combination of like the false sense of open worldness, that really makes a horror game a good horror game. Because, you know, you can do whatever the fuck you want. You can, like, if you're in Outlast, you can stay out in the front area, fucking wait. Nothing's gonna happen until you go in. Like, it is on you to move forward. It is on you to do that shit. Yeah. It's forcing you to go there without actually forcing you. And I think that's one of the aspects that, you know, really brings it out. And that is an aspect that, you know, that's why you, like, I think that's always a good thing. Because, again, it's not, in Subnautica, it's not dark. It's definitely, like, a lot of the times you will see where you're going. You have lights. Yeah, there's going to be points, but it's very small point that you'll not have a, like, you'll be in pitch black.
True.
You're going to have a source of light. You are going to be able to see. Like, the only time that I actually have an issue of not seeing was when I was moving from the beginning area to a second base. And within that span, it's literally nothing there. There is nothing there. There's no enemies. There is nothing that can kill you. And it's just pitch black. But it's still the fact of thinking, like, okay, I know that, you know, there's nothing here, but there's a possibility. And it's like, ugh, type deal. And then, you know, you go in, and you know, you're in a brightly lit area. You can go where you want. But guess what? You gotta be fucking careful. Because there's a huge-ass Leviathan right over there that if you go too fast or make enough noise, he's gonna charge you and destroy your shit. Or damage it enough where you gotta go out and make repairs.
Gotta run.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And I think that, and it's always that factor of that, what I enjoy. And, you know, Subnautica, 100% would recommend, because even though, like I said, there is horror elements, it's not entirely something that you, like, you know, it's not what you would expect, right? It's still a survival game, it's still a sandbox game, it still has those parts, you know? There's a creative mode. You can go and, like, build an amazing, huge-ass base if you want. Not even leave the planet, right? You don't have to end the game. You can just build a really cool, like, location. You can, hell, I've seen people literally just, like, not move forward on the story and just make huge towers and, like, make huge little mini cities that are all self-sustaining. Like, there's stuff that they do, and it's all that. And it's wonderful. It's great to see, like, you know, you have that kind of feeling there. And I think that's always one of those things where it's like, you still have that feeling of you can control what you want, but if you want to go in, you want to follow the story, you want to get out, you are forced into those positions, whether you like it or not. That there's suspense, it's survival, and it's horror. And I think that's why I fucking love Subnautica. I think it's, with how everything is, it's one of those things where it's like, yes, finally, type deal. Oh man, I've been talking way too much. I guess that's how podcasts go,
That is generally how podcasts go. That's always why you want to keep a water near you.
Yeah, I don't have a water. I had a fucking energy drink.
I've got 2 waters next to me. Nice.
That's pretty good.
Yep.
Honestly, though, if we had something like, a quote-unquote sponsor, I would have no problem just, tossing them in. Hey, I know this is the first episode, but hey, if you want to sponsor us, hit us up. Business shit, we can do that. We exist.
I'm trying to think of a... God, there's one sponsor. I'll have to discuss this with you off stream because I don't want to actually talk about that sponsor on screen in case they're watching, in case they ever find out about this in the future.
Yeah. But I think honestly, for me, I don't have any other statements in regards to that. But
I think at the end of the day, we really shouldn't be limiting horror games. The idea that horror can't take place in space, I feel, is not necessarily naive, but I feel it's limiting yourself, I think. Because why would you try to limit a genre by saying it's not horror if it takes place in space? I don't know. I feel like you shouldn't limit a genre like that.
Yeah. You really should. And
Let genre experiment and see what works, see what doesn't work, see what's cool about it, see what's not cool, and because that's the only way you can get new things. That's the only way. Think about it. Really, really well and truly think about it. We didn't really get looter shooters. I don't think looter shooters basically didn't really exist. Technically there were games with loot in them, but there weren't game where you would really play it and grind for the loot and just specifically for different kinds of guns or different guns armors, unless it was an MMO. Borderlands basically changed that, and that was because it combined an FPS with looters, with a looting game. But I think most games that had loot in it were basically just RPGs at that point. Whether it be MMOs or not, no other game really tried doing the looting thing before then. And so when Borderlands came on the section, it was, hey, look at this, we've got these really cool guns, and we're gonna mix it with all this loot and these shooting and we're gonna mix some RPG elements in there with the 4 classes. Go ahead and try our game and have some fun. And people did. And that's because they didn't limit themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you limit yourself, you stifle creativity.
Agreed.
And stifling creativity is essentially what kills, your... It's going to be what kills your project, whether that be a movie or a game, a TV show, anime, cartoon, whatever.
Mm-hmm. And I think with that, it's just, creativity is always going to be something that is needed. Whether it is in a new type of genre, new type of setting, or even just a new, IP. Something unique is always going to have to be made to make some progress in how we see games and how games will evolve. And I think, the way we should, end this section off, and also the podcast itself, is that in the end, the one thing that we can definitely see from, looking at Outriders, Subnautica, from, the argument made from the journalist, and kind of seeing how all the counterpoints to that, as well as comparing them to, how other games have gone through, like Avengers, and how that is. Creativity is definitely something, and passion behind that creativity has to be persistent. They have to show, and it has to really be something that you think you would enjoy. And I feel like, with that, I think we have come to the end of our first episode. Do you have any closing statements before we round this off?
Closing statements, like what, like...
Any thoughts? Because this is our first time, Because, again, this is going to be something that will change over time.
I guess closing thoughts is, I think we should probably bring in other people, not necessarily keep it to us.
Oh, yeah.
Because I feel like having like a third or fourth person, even if it's someone even if like they're just there to contest our opinions, I feel like would probably help. Probably be good.
Honestly, I feel like that's definitely something that, we should really be... Well, of course, we're going to get more people on, because I really don't, for both of us, like, it's one thing, because we have, like, two different looks of things, because, for me, I'm a competitive FPS player. You are somebody who, who works in, like, story-based, going through, like, 100%ing stuff, and so it's like we have both, like, different opinions, but again, that's only two viewpoints. And so if you want to see more people hopping in, do let us know. If you have any ideas of who you want to, to join us, do let us know, and then let them know that, hey, we're here. We exist. But yeah, like I said before, this is going to be the end. So if you do enjoy this, do stick around. Like I said before, this is going to be something that will be consistent. Consistent as in, yeah, we are going to be doing more episodes. This is not going to die out until, we say it will. But, again, the way that this is set up.
A question posed, because I guess technically you answered it in the beginning. But are we going to keep this solely to, like, gaming-related stuff? Because, like, we kind of talked about movies and other things in this. Or are we going to, like, just kind of, like, talk about whatever? Like,
honestly, I feel
regardless if it's gaming or TV shows or movies or anime or whatever.
I feel like we'll go with anything. We'll go with anything. If you have, like... And this is also something, like, you guys can see.
Because I was literally, like, in my brain, I was like, I kind of want to talk about anime, because I'm starting to get back into it. But at the same time, I don't know if we'd be doing that here.
Dude, this is the HZRDCast. This is not, we're gonna just talk about games and only games because fuck everything else. Like, we're human beings. We just divert to everything else. And if you guys, you guys watching, if you're listening on YouTube, or, you're watching us live on Twitch, let us know. Let us know if there's certain topics you want to hear. Let us know if you want us to talk about, like, certain things, If for some reason, if you want to hear us on our politics, I guess. I mean, you're not going to get, like, a really fun episode, I'll say that. But
I've made the decision to not talk about politics. If we do an episode about politics, I'll talk about it. But I've made the decision to just not talk. After the last time we talked about politics, I've just made the decision to never talk about politics on stream ever again. Just because it's not a good route to go.
It really isn't. It really isn't. But
I don't want to be the guy known for, like, talking about politics all the time.
It's like,
I don't want to become one of those people who's, like, on Twitter all the time, like, oh, politics. I know.
For us, we're just, like, we're two dumbasses who like to speak their minds. That's essentially it. But, It's up to you guys. If you guys want to see us for some weird fucking reason talk about our politics, go for it. Like, let us know. If you guys want to see us talk about anime, let us know. As much as I am, we play a lot of games. We're both still degenerates in terms of, of anime. More me than someone else. But, again, it's up to you guys. If you guys want to see something, do let us know. Follow us also on Twitter. That's where, the best place to kind of, share your thoughts on things. As well as, also, if you're watching this on YouTube, put in the description. Underneath that, the comment section. That's a thing. Do it. It's a good idea. But, yeah, like I said before, this is just a beta build. This is going to be rough. It's going to be refined over time. And it's likely that, maybe for... How much do you want to bet, we're going to go through, 100 episodes of this podcast, and then we're like, you know what? Let's go back to the original. It's like, oh my god, this is fucking terrible.
It'll probably happen. I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. But, until then, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. Do keep up to date. Follow our twiddles. Twiddles? Twiddles. We're calling it Twiddle now. Go follow our twiddles. Listen to our twilts. ToxicAWOL. And we have Sapphire Stratus here. And that's going to be it for now. Next time, who knows what the topic will be? Might want to stay there.
Pain and suffering.
That's how we feel all the time. But hey, one thing is for certain, is that I was gonna say what's the best closing statement because I fucking suck at that shit. But anyway, we have no closer yet.
Next time we'll talk about the Mortal Kombat. No, I'm kidding.
Oh God. I mean, who knows? We'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens within the next 2 weeks. But until then, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed. And let us know what you think. Because guess what? We're not stubborn assholes. We read shit. It's a conversation, not a megaphone. Enjoy the rest of your night.